Thank you very much to me. It's, I'm sure you sympathize with me. It's very difficult to talk after these two powerful ladies. The program director, Mkhize Tunandi, and she likes really attributing leadership qualities to all of us, and we always look up to her for dignity and treating people with respect and honesty and integrity. That she lives those values. My fellow panelists, the tone has been set for all of us. I'm not gonna repeat what have been said. It's really an honor to interact with the university community. It's funny this week, this is a second academic audience. I was at Iskawin, I went to Pietermaritzburg yesterday, now I'm at UJ. It's scary. Taking from what our Honorable MEC said, really, this is a very, very important month for all of us because it helps us to revisit our history and to redefine ourselves. If you cannot identify yourself and have a clear identity in terms of who you are, it creates a problem. You go to the world as nothingness. So I think what has been said, it has made all of us to think. You could have asked us as well about who we are, what we stand for, why is this month important, or these historical events that are being commemorated important. Our MEC Unandi made reference to women who really made huge sacrifices, who faced death, some disappeared, and some survived and they still live with scars. But since we are here, especially with young people, I just want to reflect a bit on the life of Charlotte Mkhize. I think for young people aspiring to be academics, I assume you are not yet academics, you are aspiring to be academics, isn't it? Okay. She's an important person to follow through. Mainly because during the very early 1900s, she saw an opportunity of pursuing studies, not only in this country. She went abroad. She could have done anything. Many people who went to America, even in the 80s of our age group, many ended up working, disappearing, and so on. You agree, Comrade Nono, isn't it?
So true.
Yes. But in the early 1900s, imagine what was the status of a black woman at that time, or of women in general in South Africa, and including America as well. But she is known to have pursued a Bachelor of Science degree at that time. And many of you today, if you attend a lecture and you don't do well, you get 10%, you start approaching the registrar wanting to change a course. And I'm sure that sounds familiar. I changed economics, I changed medical course, so I know what I'm talking about. But Charlotte Mkhize persevered, she came back to this country. And really, what's important with her is that she came back to serve the people. She didn't get lost. Because sometimes, especially once we have achieved these high degrees, we find it difficult to go back to the basics and to really say, where am I needed the most? And sometimes I think there is a growing elitism that comes with opportunities and everybody wants to float. And from what I heard from the MEC, a lot has been achieved, but as Madiba said, as you climb the mountain, you find that there are many more mountains to climb. So a lot has been achieved, but we are expected to push and to take the country forward. So I thank you very much, MEC, for the background that you have given us. I just want to quickly give a different perspective. It's not different, but it's just trying to locate the leadership qualities in terms of where we are today. Often women leaders emerged out of a clear need of dealing with inequality. Inequality, which is it's socially constructed. While we know a God innately given intrinsic value of all people is that they are equal. But we are born into a society where there are socially constructed notions of what boys are, what girls are, what women are, what men are. So most women leaders, they emerge out of a need of dealing with inequality. And it's systematic. So as a woman leader, you often don't know where to start. It's in the kitchen, it's in the playground, it's everywhere. Most of you who are in these institutions of higher learning, you can attest that if you go to different faculties, you'll find that there are still too many degrees where you find women, although they are in the majority, not even being 20% of the classroom, except if UJ has really transformed. But generally, the trend is that if, for instance, you are looking at people who want to do a Bachelor of Science, computer science, the majority of them will be, So women leadership struggle against inequality. Of all the countries included in the World Bank's development indicators, South Africa has the worst Gini coefficient. The richest 10% of the population gets over 2/5 of household income, while the poorest 60% gets only a 1/7. The world-renowned economist and former chief economist of the World Bank, which is well known to many economics students, Professor Joseph Stiglitz, said societies face a very high price for inequality, especially when inequality reaches the high level that it does in the United States and South Africa. Inevitably, economic inequality translates into political inequality that undermines our democracy. We often have the numbers right, but in terms of impact, you find that we will be there, but in terms of impact, people start raising questions. You are all familiar with the debate whether is South Africa ready for a woman president? And I saw that as a ridiculous question because nobody have ever asked men whether are you ready to be a president? So, even in terms of where we think we're making it in numbers, in terms of our value and worth, we're still not equal in people's minds. We still need to work harder, to work on transformation so that women leaders don't have to aspire to prove a point on a daily basis because it's exhausting, it's tiring, and it doesn't really dignify us to have to prove a point all the time. And sometimes we make mistakes because we are born into this system which is not meant for us, and it's so difficult. So you end up losing your principles, your values, because you have to prove a point that I'm worth it, I can do better. And so that's just my introduction, that we have to think a lot about untransformed societies are doing to our minds. And also, I just want to refer to one prominent author, Thomas Piketty, a professor of economics at the Paris School of Economics, who has really done a lot of work. He's a well-recognized academic, but he has done a lot of work to look at development and inequality and link it with poverty. So if you look the triple challenges in this country, you will understand what he's struggling with. He's linking developmental challenges with this inequality, that it leads to everything that is our challenge: poverty, underdevelopment, and all the social ills, joblessness that we're struggling with today. So in our case, really, this triple challenge has a long history, deep-rooted and multiplying itself on an ongoing basis. If you look at the question of access to land, ownership, credit, or quality of education, Even our institutions of learning, they are not yet in par. If our institutions of learning were to be evaluated and graded as Americans are doing, I mean, so many of our institutions will be right at the bottom. 21 years since we gained our democracy. And it's not because of, the old studies that rated people others seen to be of inferior intelligence. But it has a lot to do with all sorts of social ills, even in our institutions of higher learning. Of course, now there are other measures that are used, like the academic criteria for admission, and all those things which still discriminate a majority of women and make it difficult for them to enter, to access these institutions of learning. I'm not going to say much about the historical perspective because I think we really got it clearly. But, it's really a question of saying, where are you and where do you want to see in 10 years from time? If you have heard about the values and the principles of women who led us, I don't know what are you reading at the moment to deal with issues of inequality, but I can tell you that as young students, we used to read about the revolution, we'll read about Karl Marx and tell you everything about what we needed to do to transform our society. We read a lot about Paulo Freire, Education for Consciousness, which also, what was that? The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That was the name of the book. We read all those things because we were looking for a particular kind of education which was going to change our society around. And so when we say we've made gains, but there are challenges, it's a challenge to all young people to know that they have a huge responsibility to deal with the legacies of the past. Of course, we learned a lot. We used to debate Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. We liked all those books because we were defining, chanting our way. Sometimes I listen to young people on television, over the radio, being cynical about everything, about government and so on, and just wish I could go back. You know what I liked with us? We were in charge. We were in charge of our own destiny. We believed in our parents. We knew they were soldiering on, laboring as domestic workers, doing all the hard work. But we knew we had an opportunity of a lifetime to change the situation around. And most of us benefited from that because of our determination and wanting to be somewhere one day. And of course, not for our personal gain per se, but for the good of all. The MEC just indicated that those who are in politics sometimes, we spend all our time fighting for positions, which is a good thing. I suppose power is important, MEC. Power is important. If you don't have power, you're weak. But the question is, whatever you strive for, whether it's a degree or it's political power or it's economic power, you have to get your story right. What's your destiny? What do you want to use that power for? I come from the Department of Telecoms and Postal Services. I have 10 minutes. Now I'm left with 3 minutes. Our responsibility is to roll out broadband to all communities. Again, the President Zuma identified the most vulnerable municipalities because he felt people has to be connected. We have an experience of students who don't get NSFAS because they are in rural areas and the letter was posted and there was a strike or something went wrong at the post office. So once we roll out the broadband, at the post office you can pick up your mail and be able to have access to the internet. But also, while you are saying everyone, South Africa Connect, it's important to know that internet governance is important. We have a huge responsibility not to use social media to dehumanize the other. We have a responsibility to honor our constitution and what we cannot say around the table and not to say it over the social media. Also, what you cannot do, like to recruit people to be drug lords, you don't do it online, or people to go and be prostitutes somewhere else in the country. So we are here today really to inspire young people to take the most difficult subjects so that they become to be critical players in outstanding challenges. Not to be business as usual, but strategic priority causes which will help you to drive this country. Many authors have had enough to say about women in leadership and their challenges, particularly inequality. South African universities have a task to conduct studies on inequality to gather enough empirical evidence to draw from. If there is enough local empirical evidence, it will be easier to paint the picture, and once that is done, corrective measures will be fairly easily accomplished. I'm not sure, I wanted to ask you whether you have women's studies or black studies. I know most universities overseas, they have those studies mainly because inequality is a big issue. But so a few years ago, our universities didn't have those. And I hope now you have. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.